Masechet Baba Batra Daf Kof Lamed Tet Nu Mishnah Ha'av Tolesh Uma'achil Lechol Mi Sheyirseh Uma Shehiniach Talush Harehu Shel Yorshin. We're talking about a continuation of the previous case where a father, while he is alive, he grants a certain piece of land to a particular son. Let's say he has a few sons, so the father is Yaakov. He gives this land to his son Reuven, but he gives it from now and after death, which means that while the father is alive, the father can enjoy the produce, he can take it, sell it, eat it, do whatever he wants, and then immediately after death, that land will all go to Reuven. So this Mishnah is teaching us that the father can pluck things out of the ground. He's allowed to take the produce, so he can pluck whatever he wants, and he can eat it, he can feed it to others, other family members, he can give it to anybody he wants, he can give it as a gift to others, he can sell it to others, whatever he wants. Now, once he dies, whatever is left that is detached, that goes to all of the heirs. Let's say he has 12 sons. Then it gets split evenly by all 12 sons. It does not all go to Reuven. Only that which is still attached to the ground, that's not yet ready to be plucked, if it's attached to the ground and not ready to be harvested, then that's considered part of the ground itself. And Reuven would get that exclusively, just like he gets all of the land exclusively. The father, while he was alive, said all of this land is going to go to Reuven. Oh, so that's what the Mishnah teaches. So now the Gemara is going to infer, Talushin mechubad la. What goes to all of the heirs that they share equally? Only that whatever was detached. But anything that's still connected to the ground, incidentally, if something is attached to the ground but it's ready to be harvested, then that seems to be considered already harvested. So the point is that it's attached to the ground and not yet ready at the time of the death. Then it's not inherited by all the rest of the sons, but rather goes only to Reuven, which would make a lot of sense. Here's the problem. We have a contradictory baraita. Vehatanya shaminat mechubarin la lokeach. This baraita is talking about a case where the father sold the right of the produce to a third party. Right, same case as before, where the father gave the produce gave the land to his son after he dies. He kept the right to the produce for himself. He can eat it if he wants, and he can sell all the right to the produce to a third party. So that's what he does, and then he dies. And this Mishnah teaches that we assess the value of all of the produce that's still connected to the ground, and we say, how much is all that worth? Everything that's connected to the ground. Let's say it's worth $1,000, and so we tell the son who is going to get all the land, and he has to pay that purchaser. What does that mean? It means that the stuff connected to the ground really belongs to the purchaser. So if, let's say, he didn't sell it to the purchaser, then it would belong to the father, and then when the father died, it would all go to the heirs, to all 12 sons. So you see here, there is a contradiction regarding the stuff that's still connected to the ground. So everybody's in agreement with stuff that he plucked already. Whatever he plucked already off of the ground, that belonged to the father, and that will go to the heirs. And everybody agrees regarding the land itself, that it all goes to the Reuven. The question is, what about the produce that's still attached to the ground? And based on what is said in the inference from this Mishnah, it sounds like that only that which is not connected to the ground, which was detached, goes to the heirs, but anything that's still attached to the ground goes to Reuven. But according to this, if the father sold all that to a purchaser, all the produce, then the son, Reuven, has to pay that purchaser for it. And if there's no purchaser, then it would go to all of the heirs. Here's the contradiction. Amar ula la kashya, kan bibno, kan be'acher, o'ivadato shel adam kiroba esel beno. Ula says, no, there's no problem. Our Mishnah was talking about a case where he gave the land to his son, to Reuven, to who he loves. And since a person is very close to his son, he wants his son to have not only the land, but also the extra benefit of the produce that's still connected to the ground. So we assume he wants all that to go to the son. Only that which is detached he wanted for himself while he was alive, and then that will go to all of the heirs. However, this baraita was talking about a case where the father, while he was alive, said, I am going to give this land to my friend Joe, and in the meantime, I'm going to enjoy the produce. Okay, he must like Joe a lot in that he gave him this land, but he doesn't like him as much as he does his own son. So for Joe, his friend, he wants him to have the land, but not the produce that's connected to the ground. And that's why in this Baraita, once he dies, anything that's connected to the ground, we make an assessment, and Joe will have to pay that purchaser for everything connected to the ground, and then only then Joe can keep everything else that is connected to the ground because he paid for it. Good. Next Mishnah. הניח בנים גדולים וקטנים. אין הגדולים מתפרנסים על ידי הקטנים. ולא הקטנים ניזונים על הגדולים, אלא חולקים בשווה. This is the last Mishnah in this perek. And it teaches that, let's say someone dies, and he has adult children and minor children. So, the adult children are not allowed to sustain themselves at the expense of the younger ones, nor are the younger ones allowed to get food and sustain themselves at the expense of the older ones. Rather, they all share everything equally. You might have thought that maybe the older ones, because they're adults and they have more expenses, they want to buy clothes and things, so maybe they can go and take money from it. No, not so, because if they take money out of the estate, then that will be diminishing that which the younger ones have. And maybe you would have thought that the younger ones, because they're children, so how they don't have income yet, they have to be taken care of. So maybe the adult children have to take care of their younger brothers. Not so. Everybody gets an equal share, and so whatever they need, they will take out of their own share. Makes sense. נשאו הגדולים יישאו הקטנים, ואם אמרו קטנים, הרי אנו נוסעים כדרך שנשאתם אתם, אין שומעים להן אלא מה שנתן להם אביהם נתן. We're going to explain, as the Gemara will, in just a moment. If the adult children already got married, then the younger children can also get married at the same expense. This first clause is talking about after the father died. Let's say the father has 2 adult sons and 2 minor sons, and they're all not married, and then the father dies. Then the adult son makes a wedding for $100,000. And then the younger one grows up, and now he wants to make a wedding. So he says, well, older brother, he took $100,000 from the estate to make a wedding, so I deserve the same thing. So yes, he has that right. They all have a right to make the same, to spend the same amount on their weddings. And the adult children, if they get married first, they will set the precedent. So that makes sense that they should also all be able to have an equal wedding because they're all taking the same money out of the estate. However, the next clause is talking about after, if one was married before the father died. If the younger one said, we want to get married at the same way that you got married when dad was alive, then we do not listen to them. Rather, whatever the father gave them was already given. So let's say while the father was alive, the oldest son got married. And the father, he was so happy he made a $1 million wedding. So now the father died, and now there's an estate. And now the younger one wants to get married. And said, oh, well, when father was alive, he made a wedding for you for $1 million. Therefore, I also want to make a wedding for $1 million. No, we do not say that. While the father was alive, he has a right. He can give a gift to anybody he wants, and he can give more to one and less to another. He can do whatever he wants. Is that a good idea? That's a good question, but he is allowed to. And that does not set a precedent because a father can spend his own money however he wants. He doesn't have to give everybody equally. Only after he dies, then the children all get an equal right to the estate. So if someone gets married while they're alive, while the fathers are alive, that doesn't count. You don't give the other kids the same amount. But if they got married after the father died, so whatever he took out of the estate, then the younger brothers also have the same right to take that out of the estate. Now we say the same law regarding daughters. Hiniach banot gedolot uktanot. En gedolot mitpanesot al yedei ketanot vel ketanot nizonot al gedolot ela cholkin beshaveh. If a person leaves only daughters, no sons, in that case, all the daughters are going to inherit him, and they're going to inherit equally. So here also, the older daughters, there's older daughters and younger daughters. The older daughters cannot go and buy dresses and cosmetics and whatever they want at the expense of the younger ones, nor do the younger ones get food at the expense of the older ones. Rather, they all share equally. Whatever each one spends, there is the same amount as the other ones are allowed to spend. And so therefore they divide everything equally, and the older ones, if they are whatever, if they have food from another source, they can spend money on whatever they want. And the younger ones who need food, so then their food will come from their share. Nasu gedolot yisu ketanot, v'im amiru ketanot, hare anu nosot kederech shenesatem atem, and shom'in lahem. And if the older ones got married, the younger ones can also get married, meaning at the same level. Let's say when the father died, none of the kids were married. And then the older one gets married and she makes herself a $100,000 wedding. Then the younger ones can say, well, you took $100,000 out of the estate to make a wedding. We also get to do the same thing. And if the father died, however, as the Gemara will explain, that's the second clause, if one of them was married during the father's lifetime, and this father, he made for that daughter a $1 million wedding. I don't know, he liked her a lot. And then the younger ones come and say, oh, we want a wedding just like dad made for you. We do not listen to them because the father, while he's alive, whatever he spends, he spends. He can decide to spend on whatever he wants. And he doesn't have to give everybody equally. So that wedding that the father did while he was alive does not make a precedent for the younger daughters. They'll all have to share equally. Ze chomer bebanot mi bebanim. Shabanot nizonot al habanim ven nizonot al habanot. And now, last clause is there is a stringency regarding daughters that over sons. What is the stringency? That stringency means that we treat the daughters better. That daughters will get sustained from the sons. However, daughters do not get sustained from daughters. In other words, if someone dies leaving sons and sons and unmarried daughters, then the daughters get sustained by the sons. The idea is that the sons inherit the entire estate. Okay, that's good for them. But part of the ketubah stipulation is that the estate has to provide for the minor daughters. And so the sons, although they inherit, they're going to have to pay for the basic needs of those daughters. If there's insufficient funds, then in the end, the daughters will actually get everything and the sons will get nothing. If there's a huge amount of funds, $10 million, then the sons will get most of it, and they'll only have to pay a small part of it to sustain their sisters. So it could work both ways, but that's the point, that the daughters do get sustained by the sons. However, if someone dies without any sons, then the older daughters do not have to sustain the younger daughters who are not married or minors. They don't have to sustain them from their share because they all share in the inheritance equally. The daughters, in that case, all get an inheritance. So it's one or the other, basically, for the unmarried daughters who have no sustenance. Either if they have brothers, the brothers will sustain them from their share because they don't inherit, or if there are no brothers, then all the daughters share equally and they'll be sustained by their own share of the inheritance. Good. Gemara. Amar Rava. Hai gedol ache dilvash v'ikase mi beta mai da'avad avad. Rava says, if the oldest of the brothers goes and clothes himself from the house, meaning from the estate, he goes and takes $500 from the estate and he goes and buys a nice suit. That which is done is done. It does not subtract from his share of the inheritance. He is allowed to do that. He can go and take money for some nice clothes. Now, why is that? Doesn't that contradict the Mishnah? The Mishnah says that the older ones cannot be sustained at the expense of the younger brothers. So that means if he buys a $500 suit, then we should subtract $500 from his share of the estate. And the answer is matnitin bishracha. The Mishnah is talking about an unemployed person, meaning that this brother, let's say the oldest brother, who spent the $500, he has no job, he's not doing anything, he's not helping out in any way to sell the inheritance or to deal with the inheritance. So he's just buying something for himself. Okay, if he's just buying some nice clothes for himself that don't help the other brothers, then it will be subtracted from his inheritance. However, Rava was talking about a case where the older brother is employed successfully. He's a businessman, a merchant, a banker, whatever whoever he is, and he is going to be dealing with the estate. And that means he's going to have to go and collect loans and arrange everything, whatever needs to be arranged. He's going to have to be meeting people, and he has to be dressed nicely so that he can make these meetings and do them properly. So it's in the interest of all the brothers that he have a nice $500 suit that he can go to his business meetings with and make sure all the affairs of the estate are in order. So basically, it's a business expense since he's working in that sense on behalf of the inheritance, so he can take a business expense for clothing from the inheritance. Good. Sheracha peshita. And now we ask about the case of the Mishnah. Well, isn't if the Mishnah is talking about a son who is not employed and he's not going to help out with the inheritance, not doing anything, then isn't it obvious that if he spends money on himself, that will be deducted from the estate? Why would the Mishnah even need to teach us that? We might have thought that it's beneficial for the brothers that one of their brothers not look repulsive. You have this older brother, and he's all in tattered clothing, ripped shirt, right? All bad clothing, doesn't look good. And so they're going to say, we're embarrassed by him. People are going to see him walking around. They're going to say, who's that? Oh, he's from the family, that family. These are his brothers. It's going to bring a shame to his brother. So maybe you think for the benefit of the reputation of the family, it's okay for him to take these $500 and get some nice clothes. It benefits the other brothers also. That's what you might have thought. And therefore the Mishnah teaches us not so. Only if that brother is in fact working on behalf of the estate and his dressing nicely will benefit all the brothers, financially benefit, then he's allowed to spend the money on his clothing. But if it's just about reputation, that people see him and see that he's not dressed nicely, that's not sufficient. The brothers don't all have to pay for that. Nasu gedolim yisu ketanim. My ka'amad. And now we're going to ask about the next part of the Mishnah. What does Mishnah mean that if the older ones got married, then the younger ones get married? It's a very short words. The Mishnah is kind of cryptic, so we need it to be explained. Nasu gedolim lachar mitat avihen yisu ketanim lachar mitat avihen. Rav Yehuda explains. The first four words of the Mishnah are talking about after the father dies. If the older ones got married after the father dies and they each spent $100,000 on their weddings, then the younger ones who also got married after the father dies can spend the same amount. They have a right to spend the same amount because they're all taking it and sharing it from the estate. Aval nasu gedolim b'chayei avihen ve'amru ketanim lachar mitat avihen harei anu nosin keder shenasatem atem en shamin lahem ela ma shenatan lahen avihen natan abat. If the older ones got married while the father was alive and they had, let's say, a very expensive wedding, and then the sons come after the father dies and say, we want to have a wedding that's also $1 million wedding just like father gave you, we do not listen to them because whatever the father gave, he gave. The father can spend $1 million on a fancy boat ride if he wants. And so that's it. So the father happened to spend it on this wedding. But it doesn't mean that they all have a right to such a wedding. Hiniach ba'anot gedolot uketanot shelach le'avu bar geniva l'rava yilamedenu rabenu lavta ve'achla ve'amda ve'niset ba lokeach haveh o yoresh haveh. So now the next part of the Mishnah says, if someone left daughters, older and younger daughters, then they cannot spend money at the expense of each other. Rather, they can all spend their own money, but that's on whatever they want or whatever they need. Okay, now we have a question related to that. The father of Geniva asked Rava, can our master please answer this question and teach us? If a single woman borrowed money, let's say she borrowed $10,000 without a written document, just an oral loan, and she consumed that money, $10,000, she went and spent it, bought things, and used it all up. and then she got married. Now she also has some property that she inherited, that she has, and that she brings into the marriage. So once she gets married, the property that she owned are now going to transfer to the husband. He has the right to enjoy the produce and all that while they are married. So he is effectively the owner. And so now the question is, well, she still has to pay back the $10,000 to the lender. The question is the husband like a buyer, like a purchaser, or is he like an heir? What would the difference be? The question is whether the lender can go after that property, that land that the husband has. Is there a lien? Can the lender collect from that? Well, it depends if he's like a purchaser or like an heir. On the one hand, if he is like a purchaser, well then the rule is that a lender of an oral loan cannot collect from purchased property. Why? What's the difference between if it's an oral loan or if there's a written loan document? The difference is if there's a written loan document, then there is publicity. It's like it's on the records, in public record, that there's a lien on this land. If there is a public record, then a buyer, it's his responsibility to check the public record and see, is there a lien on the land? And if he knows, it's his responsibility to know that there is a lien on the land, and he buys it anyway, so he takes that into account. That's part of the risk. I know there's a lien. I know that someone may come and recollect this. I'm putting that into the price, and I know, and I'm buying it anyway. In that case, the lender can go and collect from that land. However, if it's an oral loan, then there's no public record. It doesn't create publicity. And so it's not fair to a buyer. He paid good money for this land, and all of a sudden, he finds out, oh, there was some loan beforehand, and someone takes away his property. There's no way that he could have checked that out beforehand. So it's not fair. Therefore, the lender cannot collect from an oral loan. And so if the husband that takes his wife's land and is effectively the owner of it, if we say that the original, since the original loan was an oral loan, if we treat him like a purchaser, then that lender, he can collect money from her, but he cannot go and take the land that she transferred to the husband. Or do we say that the husband is like an heir? Eventually, if the wife dies first, then he will actually inherit her. That happens to be true. But right now, she didn't die. It can't actually be an heir before you die. You can't inherit something before the person who is bequeathing it to you dies. So he's not actually an heir. However, is he like an heir? Does he have the same law where even an oral loan can be collected from heirs? The heirs doesn't matter for them whether there was a public loan or not a public loan. It's not like a buyer who can decide, should I buy it or should I not buy it? And they have to know what the risk is in order to come and decide if they want to buy it. But an heir he inherits automatically once the person dies. So an heir has to pay for the father's loans from anything that has a lien on the property. Any loans that were prior to them inheriting that land, they have to give up that land because the father owed money. So now the inheritance has to pay for it, even if it's oral. So if we say that the husband is like an heir, then the lender can go and take the land from the husband. That's the question. Amar le tanena nasu gedolot yisu ketanot. My love nasu gedolot la baal yisu ketanot mi baal. And Rava said, this is a good question. I have an answer. Didn't we learn this in our Mishnah that said if the older ones got married, the younger ones can also get married. This clause is talking about where they all got married after the father died. And the point of this line in the Mishnah is that if the older one spent $100,000 on their weddings, from the estate, then the younger ones can spend the same amount. Now, doesn't this mean Nasu Gedolot La Baal? When the older ones got married, then they took from the estate and shifted the money to their husbands to pay for the wedding. Let's say the husband initially paid for the wedding, and now to recoup some of that money, so some of the estate money went to this married girl, and then that went to the husband, and now the husband has that money. It didn't go that way. And when the younger ones get married, then it goes back the other way. The younger daughters, when they get married, in order to help pay for their wedding, they will extract money from their older sisters' husbands. So they are extracting money. In other words, when the older ones get married, so now that money will go to their husbands, and it's kind of there in lying in wait, because we don't know how much if the younger ones will get married. If not, how much it will be, and so on. So eventually, when the younger ones get married, it's kind of like a loan that the husband, their older brother-in-law, is holding for them, but they have to pay. So what do we see from here? It's like an oral loan that the younger ones can collect from the property that the husbands took. So that means they are more like heirs. And yes, you would have to pay. And so this would be equivalent to if this older sister borrowed money and then had to pay back. So the lender also could take from the husband. So that's the same thing. So we have an answer, right? La nasugedot la baal yisud ketanot la baal. Now, how do you know you should put a mem here? Mi baal. Maybe they're a lamed and then a mem. Maybe they're both lameds, both la baal. And in that case, it would mean that when the older ones get married, then some of the estate goes from the estate to the husband in order to pay for the wedding. That's true for the older ones, and if they spent $100,000, then when the younger ones also get married, then the money from the estate goes to the husbands to help pay for the wedding. Let's say the husbands paid for it first, laid out the money. So maybe it's all going the same way, from the estate to the husbands, and not being extracted from the husbands of the older wives. And therefore, there's no older sisters. So there's no proof from here. No, but you cannot say that it's lamed and lamed in the Mishnah, because there is a baraita that's taught by the Bichia that says if the older sisters got married and transferred money to the husband, then when the younger ones get married, they transfer money from those husbands, from their older brothers-in-law. So that means that they are like heirs, and they do have to pay up a loan that was taken out before. And so that is a good answer. No, but maybe not. No, maybe paying for expenses for the wedding of the younger sister is something that does have publicity. Whenever someone gets married to the older sister, he's going to know, oh, you have younger sisters, they're not married, so he's going to know that some of the money that he's taking from the estate of his sister is going to be taken away, because he's taking more of the share of the inheritance right now, only because he's holding on to it, and later on, when the younger ones get married, then he will have to pay for it. Since this is a well-known thing, so it's as if it's a loan that's in a document. So it could be that he has the status of a purchaser. But just like a purchaser, as long as it's written in a document and there's publicity, the purchaser has to give up the land. So too, here, even though it's not written in a document, but it has publicity, and that's why he has to give it up, because it's like a document. But it could be, in fact, that a husband is like a purchaser, so that in the original case we were talking about, where she took out a loan of $10,000 before she got married, then the husband would be a purchaser, and if it's a loan or a loan, he would not have to pay, or even though he does have to pay for the younger sister, because there that has publicity. Amar Papa Rava, Lav Hainu de Shalach Rabin Beigarte, Mishemet Viniach Almana Ubat, Almanato Nizonet Minechasav, Niset Habat, Almanato Nizonet Minechasav, Meta Habat, Amar Rav Yehuda ben Achoto Shel Rabbi Yosef ben Hanina, Al Yadi Yamase Vamru, Almanato Nizonet Minechasav. Rav Papa tells Rava I have a proof for your position from a letter that Ravin sent from Eretz Yisrael. Again, Rava's answer before we diverted it, the Gemara brought a different conclusion, but Rava's original answer was that we do consider a husband to be an heir, and that we learn that from here, from the fact that if the husband is holding on to the money, that when he gets the husband of the older sister, then when the younger sister gets married, then she can extract money from him. And this is before we say, oh, it has a publicity. Rava's answer simply was that we consider the husband to be an heir, and we can give support to this hypothesis from what he says in the following letter. If someone dies and he leaves after him a widow and an unmarried daughter, so what happens? He doesn't have a son, so the daughter will inherit everything, and as part of the ketubah, the widow will be sustained from his property, although the daughter owns it, but the daughter from the estate will have to provide for the widow. It could be her mother or her stepmother. And Niset Habat, once that daughter gets married, well then once she gets married, the estate will go to the husband until it'll be under his control. He can enjoy the fruits of it. Again, if he dies, then she gets it back, and so on. But if she dies first, then he inherits it. Anyway, now he is the effective owner. But nevertheless, even though he's the effective owner, still the widow gets sustained from that estate. So the husband that still has to take from this estate and provide for her. Me tahabat. If she dies, this daughter, that means the husband will inherit everything. Does he still have to provide for her, for his mother-in-law or whatever, stepmother-in-law after he dies? And the answer is yes. Amar Rav Yehuda ben Achotov shel Bi Yosef ben Chanina. He says, I had a case that had happened just like this. Says Rav Yehuda, the nephew of Rabbi Yosef ben Chanina, and the rabbi said the widow still gets sustained from the property, even though it's totally owned, it's totally inherited by the husband. So what do you see from here? That the husband is considered an heir. And that's why an heir has to still pay for any prior liens, loans, responsibilities that were there before. He cannot have a claim as a purchaser, but rather as an heir. Papa explains, if you say he's like an heir, that would make sense. That's why the widow still gets sustained from the property. But if he's a purchaser, why does he have to pay for that widow? He bought it, so it should be totally his. It's not considered a loan, a document with a loan, so why would he still have responsibility? Again, the heir, he is of course an heir from the wife, that's for sure, because she died and he is the heir. The question is he considered even before that, while she is alive and he takes control of the estate? Is he at that point considered a purchaser? If it was a purchaser, then he would not have to pay for the widow, because it's not a loan that was with a document that doesn't have publicity. And so this is a proof that he is an heir even at that point. Amar Abaye, ilav deshlach Ravin, ana la yadinan. Abaye says, well, you're telling me if not that Ravin sent this, I wouldn't know it? I know it anyway from a different source. Because I don't need this proof from Ravin and Amora. I would know it from a Mishnah, which is even higher authority. Patanan, eluhen she'en chozrin bayovel habechora. The Mishnah in Masechet Bechorot says the following things do not return to their original owners during a Yovel year, even though most things do. A Bechorah, firstborn. If a father dies and the firstborn gets double, and then if the Yovel comes, the firstborn doesn't have to give his second portion and share it with the rest of the heirs. It doesn't as if it would go back to the father and then get split evenly because the father's dead. No, the firstborn keeps it forever. Vayoresh et ishto, and also someone who inherits his wife's property. After she dies, he keeps that forever and it stays stays in his line and to his heirs. It doesn't go back to the original owner, which might be his father-in-law, her father, who originally owned this land and gave it as part of the bride price, as part of the dowry, to put it into the marriage, and then the husband inherits it. He doesn't have to go back to the original owner. He keeps it forever. And so what do we see from here? We see that the husband has the status of an heir, because an heir keeps everything permanently. A purchaser does not. If the husband was like a purchaser, then he could buy it for now. In the 50th year, anything you buy goes back to the original owner. So you see that the husband is in fact like an heir. Amar le Rava, v'ashta tishlach mi yadinan. Rava says, oh, and now that Ravin, he says the opposite view. Now that Ravin sent this, now we know it. Actually, it's not true, and I have a proof against what Ravin said in the letter, against the idea that the husband is like an heir. In fact, I'm going to prove that he is like a purchaser. Ve'amar Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina, b'usha etkinu ha'isha shemachra nichse melog bechaye ba'ala umeta habal mosi miyad halakochot. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina said that in Usha the rabbis made a takana, and they said that if a wife sells the property that she brought into the marriage, that the husband will use and take the produce of it while they're married, and then she gets back the property at the end of the marriage. That type of property, when the husband is alive, he gets to use it. Let's say she sells that property while the husband is alive, while they are still married. She sells it, she gets the money. After she dies, the husband can go and repossess it from the purchasers. What does that mean? That means the husband is considered like an earlier purchaser. If someone sells something that's already sold, then he can get it back. If he was like an heir, then he would not be able to get it back, because the husband as an heir, after she dies, well, that only happens after she dies, right? So the husband only gets the property itself from his wife after she dies, but she already sold it beforehand. So if he was only an heir, that would only apply once she dies, and then that would be too late. He would not be able to repossess something that she sold in her lifetime. However, if we consider the husband to be like a purchaser, and that happens as soon as they get married, he gets the land and he is like a purchaser. In that case, his purchase is prior to the wife's selling of the land while they are married. And therefore, even if she does that, he can repossess it from them. And so you see from here a proof the other way around, that a husband is in fact like a purchaser. So how are we going to resolve all these things? It's not just a question about Rava or Ravin, it's a fundamental question about all these sources that seem to contradict each other. And the answer is, Baal, Shavyu Rabbanan Keyoresh, Veshavyuhu Rabbanan Kelokeach. A husband, sometimes the rabbis consider him like an heir, and sometimes like a purchaser. He's not all one and not all the other. He is both, and depending on the context. The rabbis say, whatever is beneficial for the husband, that's what we do to him. We want to give some benefit to the husband to help him out, and therefore we'll view this land that he gets in whatever way that's beneficial. Regarding Yovel, we treat him like an heir, because otherwise he would lose it out. Otherwise, when the 50th year comes, then he'll have to return that land that he inherited from his wife after she died. He'll have to return it to his in-laws, and that would be bad for him. So therefore we consider him like an heir, and that way he can keep it. When it comes to the law of Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina, who said that if a wife sells the land while she is married, then the husband can afterwards repossess it, we consider the husband like a buyer, so that it's beneficial for him. Otherwise, he would lose out the land if she sold it and he couldn't get it back. However, with regard to Ravin's question, Ravin's letter, where he said that if someone dies and leaves a daughter and a widow, and then the daughter gets married and the daughter dies, and now the husband has everything, he still has to provide for her. There, we're treating him like an heir, and he still has to provide. Now, this is not for the benefit of the husband, because for the benefit of the husband, it would be to treat him like a buyer, and then he would not have to pay for the widow's expenses. So in this case, we're more concerned about the loss of the widow. We don't want the widow to go hungry, and therefore we actually do something that's against the husband and for the almanah. So that's this rule that we started with is not actually always true. We generally benefit the husband when it comes to, as opposed to his in-laws or as opposed to a buyer. But when it comes to a widow, then we treat him like an heir so that the widow will be taken care of. And now we ask about this very question. How come when it comes to Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina, where there's buyers, we make him like a purchaser, which so that the buyers lose out and the husband gets the benefit. But when it comes to a widow, we give the widow the benefit against the husband. And the answer is Hatam inhu afsidu anafshaihu. Kevanti ikaba la iba'e lehu lemizban miteta yediatba tute gabra. And the answer is not only because we care about a widow and we want to make sure that she's taken care of, but furthermore because those buyers, they cause their own loss because they knew that there is a husband. When this wife comes and says, I'm going to sell you land, so it's obvious she's married and the husband is in control of that land while they're married, and they bought it anyway. They, if they were smart, they should not have purchased the money from a wife who's living under her husband, knowing that she might die and then the husband will inherit and then they're going to have problems. So that's why we don't care about the purchasers. In general, also we want to protect purchasers because we want to make sure the economy runs. So that's true in general. Here, they should have known better than to buy it, and that's why we do benefit the widow. She had this benefit from before they were married, so she deserves that for that benefit to continue. Whereas the purchasers, they should have seen the bigger picture and known not to buy this land. Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen ve'Amen. Hadran alach yesh nochalin, chazakim uberuchim.